Mandatory minicamp opens for the Miami Dolphins today. Several days of the Dolphins with mandatory attendance. What are the storylines to watch? We have you covered here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked On Network, today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Mandatory minicamp. The next hurdle is here for the Dolphins, fresh off of Finn's weekend, which is the big fishing tournament that they do annually. That has come and gone. We're into June, which means training camp is next month, right? You're going to have the mini camp, and then you're going to have your 6-week or whatever layoff that it's going to be. And then we're going to be into the thick of it. So this is kind of the last opportunity to really soak in hands-on work with the players if you're the team. And there's a lot of storylines that I think are notable. I think there's a lot of positional battles that we are aware are going to exist. I have my thoughts on who I think the favorites for those positions should be based on the players currently under the roster. But I think anytime that you kind of have this kind of storyline building like we've seen in the last week with Tyreek Hill, these are the kinds of storylines that I think if you're looking for things to watch in training camp, the two guys with the big contracts that the Dolphins, it's been reported, are either working on getting done or are interested in working on getting done, or the player wants it done. That's the primary stories as far as I'm concerned, and that's Tua Tagovailoa and Tyreek Hill. Obviously, the starting quarterback and the best player on the team. Two pretty important stories to make sure that you have put together if you're the Dolphins. And what kind of participation? I would expect attendance for at least Tua. I know Tyreek was at his media day session recently. The Dolphins put out a clip of him kind of doing his video vignettes for the big board at the stadium and all that stuff. So maybe that's a clue that Tyreek Hill is there. How big of a stink is this going to end up being? That, for me, is front row center. I want to know what kind of attendance and activity those two players in their bids to secure their desired contract outcome, because they're very different desired contract outcome depending on their specific needs. That's what I want to know. For Tua, it's pretty simple. He wants the long-term contract. And I thought Ian Rappaport had an interesting update on this yesterday. He was on one of the NFL Network programs with Mike Garafolo, and he was talking about the contract extension negotiations with Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins and Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And there were two bits that I thought that Ian Rappaport said that were particularly interesting. Everybody kind of grabbed one, but they didn't grab the other. I'm paraphrasing. The quote was, the Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa and his team have done, quote, considerable, and that's a direct word, quote, considerable work on a contract extension, and that they are closer to getting a contract extension done than Jacksonville is with Trevor Lawrence. Everybody heard that, grabbed that, great. But if you kept listening to what Ian was saying, Ian then continued to say something along the lines of, could an extension get done in the next couple of days? These things can turn on a dime rather quickly, so all of that's on the table. Do I think realistically an extension gets done this week? No. but 2 is going to be there. And as he said, these things, once they build, they can happen rather quickly. And to this point, kind of the reporting of the negotiations has been touch and go. Nobody seems overly concerned that it's not going to get done. But there hasn't necessarily been a sense that something was like building to imminent. I think this is the closest that we've gotten to that from Ian Rappaport. So that definitely. But then on the Tyreek Hill front, it kind of started as a quiet, consistent talking point. Now it's become a much larger thing. Adam Schefter went on the Pat McAfee show yesterday and came right out and said that he expects that Tyreek Hill will get some kind of contract adjustment from the Dolphins. That's his expectation that will get done to put him more in line with his peers. Obviously, the Justin Jefferson contract drops, and that was an annual average salary of $35 million per. And once that contract was finalized, felt like every insider in the game had something to say about Tyreek's looking at the Justin Jefferson contract. So that's where both of those things stand. But what is their participation this week? What is their attendance this week? That for me is front row and center as far as storylines going into minicamp, because you're not going to put the pads on, right? So like your positional battle stuff, it's compelling. It's a piece of information that helps you with the evaluation process and can further hone your expectations going into training camp, or better give you an idea of what kinds of players you maybe need to go out and find for the best competition you can possibly have going into camp. But these two guys are centerpieces of at least the current iteration of the team. One of these guys, in Tagovailoa, is a prime of his career from an age perspective, is considered a long-term building block for the team. Tyreek Hill, I think there's a fascinating revelation that we will get with whatever adjustment Adam Schefter is expecting that the Dolphins and Tyreek Hill are going to agree to. Are there extra years on the deal? Is an adjustment at the current years of the contract? That'll tell you quite a bit, because that'll tell you about how long the team envisions Tyreek Hill being a cornerstone for this franchise, which is what he is. But this entire conversation has been about onloading and offloading big contracts, and it was kind of assumed, well, once you pay Jalen Waddle, there's a transition to be had. Well, if there's not, and the team decides that they want to have their cake and eat it too, the concessions elsewhere becomes a whole Pandora's box of things that you can open up. And if they add extra years to the back end of the deal, that's kind of where I think this thing goes. But for minicamp purposes alone, does something get done? It's something to watch. What is their attendance? It's something to watch. How much do they participate? It's something to watch. Because you know what's interesting? All the focus that was on Tua Tagovailoa, whether he was holding out or whatever from mandatory workouts or voluntary workouts, find me one clip from the Dolphins social media team this spring that shows Tyreek Hill at practice doing anything. Let me know if you can find it. That is the contract stuff. Now for some football stuff. That's next here on Locked On Dolphins. Look at the offensive side of the ball and some positional battles that I have thoughts on going into minicamp. Going to the game is not supposed to be a stressful experience. And if you're trying to get up the sunrise and go to an NHL Stanley Cup final game with the Vamos Gatos Florida Panthers taking on the Edmonton Oilers, first game I believe is on Saturday, the 8th. Get your tickets to Gametime. Gametime has you covered with last-minute deals. You could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You get flash deals and zone deals. And with all-in pricing, you can see the total cost of your tickets before you put them into your cart, so there's no surprises. And with a panoramic view from your seat, you know exactly what sight lines you're signing yourself up for. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today for last-minute tickets with the lowest prices guaranteed. Offensive positional battles going into training camp or mini camp, excuse me. Getting ahead of myself. I wish it was training camp. I guess you start up at the top and we'll just work our way down. We'll go quarterback down through offensive line. I don't think there's much in the way of positional battles for the quarterback position. I think we're pretty firm. Tua Tagovailoa is your starter. Mike White, with the investment that the team has in him, I think he has a better total body of work than Skylar Thompson does. You can count me out of the school of thought that Skylar Thompson, if given time and development and investment, would be a viable starting option, or I think even a backup option for the Dolphins. I'm not of that school of thought because I saw him play in 2022. At the running back position, I think running back 4 is where it gets really interesting, and I don't know how many bodies beyond the 4th back are going to make the cut because you're going to have Alec Ingold, you have Raheem Mostert, you have Devon Achane, you have Jalen Wright, who the team spent a 3rd-round pick in 2025 to draft. Right? That leaves 3 backs that have viable arguments to be on a 53-man roster. Savon Ahmed, Jeff Wilson, and Chris Brooks. Chris Brooks made the team last year. Let's not forget that. Jeff Wilson, the team traded for, and this had a lot of success between San Francisco and in 2022 when he first came to the team at the trade deadline, taking over the Chase Edmonds reps, mercifully, for everyone involved. And then Savon Ahmed's kind of lingered around. I know Savon kind of gets bagged a little bit by Dolphins fans because they're ready for this experiment, or not experiment. Savon gets associated with all the really bad offenses that Miami had in the Brian Flores era. And I understand why. But Savon's if he was your 4th running back, I think you'd feel pretty good about your running back depth and situation. And I think he has a legitimate argument. In case in point, he's consistently found ways to be on call and make plays when he's called upon. Now, is he a preferred starter? No. Is he a preferred high-volume player? No. But Ahmed, Wilson, and Brooks, right now, for my money, are competing for 1 spot. And you got 3 roster caliber players in the mix. Wide receiver, it's kind of the same thing. You get past the first 3. Waddle, Beckham, Hill. I think maybe you have 3 spots, but you have at least 4 guys that have an argument to claim a spot. 5 guys, if you include both the rookies. I know some people have high expectations for Taj Washington. But assuming they keep 6, Ezukama, Craycraft, Berrios, Malik Washington, Taj Washington. It's a lot of competition. It should be healthy competition for who's going to win those reps at the bottom of the depth chart. I expect Braxton Berrios to have an inside track. They gave him a little bit of a bigger commitment than, say, River Craycraft. Eric Ezukama, you would assume, is a draft pick that they kind of had some visions for and a different body type. You would assume that he's in the mix. And now you're really narrowing the field if that's the case. That's not to say Berrios is a slam dunk, but that's kind of how I perceive that room. Tight end, different skill sets across the board. Jonnu Smith, I think, should be the favorite to play on passing downs. I think Durham Smythe should be your favorite to play on running downs. The challenge for Miami will be having a balance from a personnel standpoint and not tipping their hand, right? If you get a Mike Gesicki situation and 80% of my snaps that I'm on the field, we're passing the ball, there's a nice little personnel tell there that maybe we want to reel in a little bit. And the nice thing I think about Jonnu Smith is I do think he's in space a versatile blocker where maybe not stick your hand in the dirt and block a defensive end type of reps, but getting up on the second level or getting out on a safety or doing split flow action out of the backfield. I think there's enough versatility there for Jonnu Smith where he can have a versatile role, but I think that puts him in kind of the leaderboard position to be the primary snap taker at tight end. But technically, I think you can say there's a battle between Jonnu and Durham Smythe for who's the quote-unquote tight end 1. I'd lean Jonnu Smith. On the offensive line, I think the tackle Situation is fairly static. I think a lot of the battles come inside at guard. Aaron Brewer, there's no question is your starting center. I think a healthy Isaiah Wynn, there's no question is your starting left guard. That leaves Robert Jones, Jack Driscoll, Liam Eichenberg, Lester Cotton, maybe Kendall Lamb. All those guys competing for one spot. If you took all those names and told me all those names were depth players on your 53, I feel really good. But if one of them's got to start, it kind of gets into the tomato can theory, right? The tomato can theory for offensive line play is you just can't have any turnstiles. You can't have a tomato can out there. If you have guys that have redeeming qualities and the chemistry's good, you can make it work. And look, Chris Forrester used to be the Dolphins' offensive line coach, had an unceremonious ending to his time here in Miami. But he's now San Francisco 49ers offensive line coach. So he's working in the same system. And Forrester's come across my timeline more than once in the past month. One of those reasons being he did an offensive line coaching clinic about the wide zone. And I took a lot of value out of it, talking about the mechanics of how they want it to work and how they want it to look and how they want it to feel for defenses. And then he also had this long press conference monologue, was asked about kind of the construction of an offensive line. And he, as an offensive line coach, advocated for get the guys that score touchdowns. We feel like we can teach and develop within our scheme. And mind you, this is not Miami. He's in San Francisco saying this. And it's the same coaching tree, right? But he's advocating for player development up front and how we think we can get this, that, and the other thing. Miami feels the same way. They've told us they feel the same way with their actions. Do what monkey see monkey. That's not the right. Point being, actions speak louder than words. I'll go with the simple one instead of the cute one. And Miami and their chosen direction with investing in the interior offensive line specifically, it tells a story. And I know a lot of us have concerns about what that's going to look like in season. And hopefully they find a proper intersection of a player who's a little bit more of a proven starting talent at an economic price point that's friendly for them, and they can add somebody else to the mix. My expectations aren't particularly high. Now, Barry Jackson of the Herald reported a couple months ago that the Dolphins pre-draft were in contact with veteran guards. Are any of them left? I know Greg Van Roten and Phil Haynes are still out there. But Phil Haynes, I don't see a big needle moving jump over Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg. I'm going to be honest. So I think that battle for that right guard spot in particular, and by extension, the left guard spot with Isaiah Wynn's injury durability history, don't expect them to go out and sign two guards. I think that battle is going to be healthy. I think Jack Driscoll, as an interior player, can bring something really compelling to the table. I think they still have high hopes for Liam Eichenberg based off of the play in this scheme that he's been able to get. I don't think my expectations are going to be anything more than that's somebody who ideally is a quality depth player for you, because you know that there's security in being able to play multiple spots. But look at the 49ers offensive line. Trent Williams is their cornerstone, right? They had a street free agent in Jake Brendel. They signed John Feliciano, who's a replacement level player. He comes in there and clicks at right guard for them. 5th round pick at tackle in Colton McKivitz. Ben Bartz, they got off free agency, was a replacement level player in Jacksonville. They had a 4th round pick in Spencer Burford. They had a 5th round pick in Jalen Moore. It's kind of Nick Zackles was a developmental type guy. It's a 6th round pick in 2022. It's kind of the same deal. Like they apply it the same way. So if you look at, and Green Bay's to a little bit of a lesser extent, I think they kind of got out of their own way a little bit this year, because they drafted Jordan Morgan in the 1st round. But their investments have largely kind of been mid-round guys as well. They had Rasheed Walker behind Bakhtiari. Rasheed Walker was a 7th-round pick in 2022. Zach Tom was a 4th-round pick in 2022. These might be their best offensive linemen this side of Ellington Jenkins. So some of these coaching tree coaches in Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan and now Mike McDaniel, they're kind of showing their cards here, and it's the same thing over and over again. So I think the battles will be intense. I think there's 4 or 5 guys that can walk out of that with a win based off of who is in-house now. Now, if you go out and get somebody with starting experience you feel good about, I'd say, okay, write them in pen, and then the competition's all going to be for how many guys they carry behind them and who the guys are that make the cut. We're going to go to the defensive side of the ball next with some battles next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you stick with us. It is playoff time, winner take all in the NBA and NHL. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Defensively, the interior defensive line is your most compelling spot, right? I think you have some backup competition pieces in the secondary with the safety 3 right now. I think you have the third outside corner spot between Cam Smith and potentially Nick Needham and Kader Kohu, who claims that role. Because I expect Jalen Ramsey, when they go into sub-package stuff, becomes the movable player that moves all around. So you have Kendall Fuller, Jalen Ramsey. Who's the third corner? The nice thing is Kader can play inside and out. Cam can play inside and out. Nick can play inside and out. I think his outside ceiling is a little lower than the other guys. That battle between players who are on the 53, I think makes it a little less compelling because you know all those guys are probably in the fold for the 53, whereas on the interior offensive line, of the names that we mentioned, 2 of them might not even make the 53. Running back 4 for the Dolphins, 2 of those guys aren't going to make the 53, probably. It's not quite the case because of all the versatility in the back end. But I think up front, sorting out this smorgasbord of interior defensive linemen is where the competition is going to be intense. I've heard from more than one person who's well-connected and around the organization in some capacity or another. The team seems to like and have higher expectations for Deshaun Hand than I do. Take that for what you will. I didn't really see it on the tape last year. I thought he got moved around. Now, were there some nice penetration and getting into a gap reps from Hand? Yeah. But as far as anchoring and working on the long line of scrimmage and being a stout player at the point of attack, I didn't necessarily see that with consistency. So maybe they have a little bit of a different role. And if they do, great. Would love to see it. Who wins the nose tackle job? We went into that, was it yesterday? Talking about how that there's, if you want to spend, there's some vet nose tackle guys. I would love to see them go out and spend for. I don't know that they will. I have higher expectations for Jonathan Harris from Denver. I think is a base end. I think is a 4-eye, which is inside shade on the inside shoulder of the offensive tackle. So for your odd front stuff when you go 3-down lineman. I kind of have some expectations for Jonathan Harris. I think he's got length. I think he's got hand power. A lot of the things that I kind of question whether Deshaun Hand is or not. I think Jonathan Harris is. I don't think Jonathan Harris has a huge ceiling in passing downs, but let's be honest, in your passing downs, you're going to get as many of these dynamic, explosive athletes as you can on the field. And a lot of those guys are going to be off. Like he'd probably be Zach Sealer, and that's it. So that for me is where the most intense battle lies. And my expectations versus kind of what the drumbeat is 2 different things. Tier Tart's a total wild card. I think it's a really compelling group. And it's like with the running back spot and the wide receiver spot and the interior offensive line spot, there's going to be guys that are in competition to have like a primary rotational role on that front. that don't make the 53. And those are the compelling pieces. And if the Dolphins don't add anybody today and they go through minicamp and they get out and they add somebody at one of these spots, I think it will tell you a lot. So maybe the storyline for the positional battles isn't what happens on minicamp on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And instead, the storyline for minicamp is what the Dolphins do once it wraps. And that should set your expectations. That is going to do it for me here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Be back again to talk to you all again soon. We'll see if we get some news. If we do, I'll talk to you then. If not, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Fins up.